Welcome to today's Explainer. We usually think of learning as this steady climb, right? Like a hike up towards some brighter, more triumphant peak. But today, we're going to do something entirely different. We are going on a mythic descent. Just think for a second about the frantic energy we spend every single day. The relentless ambition, the hustle, the desperate need to build a legacy, to conquer, to be the hero of our own story. It's exhausting, isn't it? Well, today we are stripping all of that away to look at the unvarnished truth. This isn't your traditional upbeat lesson. It's a literal exploration into the shadows of human existence, looking for the profound clarity that's just waiting for us in the dark.
Okay, let's dive right in with our first mythic guide, Koheleth, the biblical author of the book of Ecclesiastes. He hits us with this incredibly powerful line, vanity and a chasing after the wind. In the original Hebrew, the word used for vanity is hevel, which literally translates to vapor or breath. It's something you can clearly see, but you can never actually grasp. It's a stunningly bleak realization, and it really sets the stage for the shared philosophical obsession we're exploring today. Koheleth looked at all human labor, all wealth, all legacy under the sun, and recognized the profound futility of our worldly striving. This isn't just some ancient complaint. It's the absolute foundation of the dark sage archetype. It's the starting point of our journey, admitting to ourselves that the things we so desperately chase are largely just illusions.
Section 1. The Illusion of Vanity and the Anti-Hero's Descent.
To truly understand the dark sage, we first have to admit something about ourselves. Human beings are fundamentally wired with an optimism bias. We are biologically programmed to believe that things will work out, that we're somehow special, and that all our hard work will give us permanent satisfaction. But to find reality, we have to map out the breakdown of that traditional, triumphant hero's journey. We do this in 3 agonizing but totally necessary steps. First, we start with step 1, the arrogance of control. That's our naive belief that we actually command our own destiny. Then comes the painful step 2, the stripping of illusions, where life flat out proves that our control is minimal and our ambitions are incredibly fleeting. Finally, we arrive at step 3, stoic endurance. This is exactly where the dark sage lives, not in some state of conquered joy, but in a state of clear-eyed, unshakable endurance.
Moving into Section 2. Architectures of the Void and their structural mechanics.
So, how is it that 2 vastly different philosophers, separated by literally centuries, arrived at the exact same conclusion about the futility of human striving? Well, it's fascinating because they actually map the cosmos in completely different ways. On one side, we have Koheleth, representing the biblical worldview. He sees this tragic limitation under an inscrutable God, a divinely ordered but deeply flawed world, where humans are trapped in these cyclical time patterns, where justice is rarely guaranteed, and where everything is just vapor. But then, on the other side, we have the 19th century German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer just removes the divine framework entirely. He replaces God with what he calls the will, this blind metaphysical force. So for Koheleth, futility is a cosmic limitation under a creator. But for Schopenhauer, it's a cruel cosmic joke driven by an insatiable, hungry universe. Let's zoom in on Schopenhauer's concept of the will for a second. Now, this isn't willpower like hit in the gym or sticking to a diet. Schopenhauer argued that the universe is driven by this blind, irrational force that perpetually hungers without any actual purpose. And here's the truly agonizing part of his theory. He believed that we, as human beings, are merely limbs of this blind urge. Because we're driven by the will, we're doomed to this maddening cyclical swing. We swing like a pendulum back and forth between the sharp pain of unmet desire and the crushing emptiness of boredom the second we actually get what we want. Which brings us to a really profound shared conclusion beautifully summed up by Ecclesiastes. In much wisdom is much grief. The dark sage archetype gets this completely. They understand that real insight inherently destroys superficial happiness. A heavy heart isn't a failure, it's the inevitable badge of honor worn by anyone who refuses to lie to themselves about reality. True maturity, according to both Koheleth and Schopenhauer, is absolutely not the achievement of endless joy. It's the stoic endurance of a fundamentally unfulfillable existence.
Section 3. Divergent Paths to Salvation and Finding Survival.
All right, so if the baseline of existence is disappointment, and the cosmos is either flawed or actively cruel, how do we actually survive it? The crucial point here is their differing prescriptions for salvation. Koheleth, despite his crushing grief over the vanity of life, ultimately finds a quiet sanctuary of survival right here in the world.
He recommends the faithful enjoyment of really simple pleasures: eating, drinking, hanging out with friends. Schopenhauer, however, demands absolute renunciation to escape the cycle entirely. He advocates for total ascetic denial, aesthetic contemplation, and the complete and utter extinguishment of desire.
And this brilliantly highlights the clash between finding comfort in the darkness versus viewing that comfort as a trap. Koheleth sees a warm meal or a quiet moment with a friend as a brief, humble gift from an inscrutable creator. It's something you cherish before the inevitable darkness of death arrives. But Schopenhauer, he rejects this accommodation completely. To him, those simple pleasures are nothing but mere bait. They're used by the cosmic will to keep us hooked, to keep us desiring, and to basically prolong our collective agony. He demands we stop taking the bait altogether.
Section 4. The Science of Clear Sight in Modern Psychology.
Now, what's wild is that what sounds like poetic, ancient pessimism actually has a real, scientifically observed counterpart today. Let's talk about the hypothesis of depressive realism. It suggests that individuals experiencing mild depression often hold a more accurate, objective perception of reality than their non-depressed peers. Seen in this light, melancholy isn't a malfunction of the mind. Actually, it's a deliberate, highly tuned attunement to reality's tragic architecture. Depressive realism scientifically validates the archetype of the dark sage. The sage isn't broken. The sage is just seeing the world without the rosy filters of cognitive bias.
This completely flips the script on what psychology traditionally labels a clinical vulnerability. In fact, it frames it as an extraordinary superpower of objective clarity. Think about the so-called mentally healthy individual. They actually rely heavily on cognitive biases and positive illusions just to get through the day. They are highly susceptible to the illusion of control. But contrast that with the depressive realist, who accurately gauges their actual lack of influence over external events. Because they don't inflate their own importance, they are entirely insulated from shattered expectations. Optimism, it turns out, is just an evolutionary shield. Melancholy, in this context, serves as objective truth.
Section 5. The Tax of Truth and the True Cost of Wisdom.
Look, stepping into the shoes of the dark sage, it's not a free transaction. Imagine this final encounter. A youth, representing our modern culture's mandatory performance of hope, confronts the sage. The youth is passionately insisting that every setback is just a setup for a triumphant comeback. They are demanding the traditional hero's journey. But the sage refuses the call. Completely unmoved, the sage simply points out to the cold night sky, offering only the unvarnished truth of the void. They reveal, gently but firmly, that the hero's journey is often just a narrative fiction we designed to keep despair at bay.
The cost of the sage's clarity is incredibly severe, because when you shed your protective, evolutionary biases, you're left completely exposed to the cold and different currents of life. Schopenhauer warned us about this. He said this acute awareness could easily paralyze an individual, turning daily existence into a realm of pure, unmediated dread. It brings on profound emotional exhaustion, and perhaps worst of all, it results in severe social isolation. Let's face it, modern culture actively rejects and isolates those who refuse to smile and perform that mandatory optimism.
Section 6. Finding sanctuary in the silence and the authentic life. We've stripped away the vanity, we've faced down the blind will, and we've calculated the exhausting tax of objective reality. So where does that actually leave us? Well, it leaves us right here. The intersection of Ecclesiastes, Schopenhauer, and depressive realism points us to one profound revelation. True heroism is found in the quiet courage required to face the void without blinking. By accepting our total lack of control, the cruelty of the cosmic mechanics, and the sheer vanity of life, we are finally freed from the exhausting tyranny of false promises. In this space, melancholy stops being an enemy you have to fight off every single day. Instead, it becomes the ultimate, unshakable foundation for a deeply authentic life. As we bring this explainer to a close, I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts to chew on. What emotional tax are you willing to pay for the unvarnished truth? And dare you shed the illusion of control to find your own authenticity in the dark? Take a moment, sit in the quiet sanctuary of your own thoughts, and really ask yourself, are you ready to become the sage? Thanks so much for joining me on this descent. I'll see you next time.